Cool. Thanks, Terence. Let's get started. So, okay. First item of the agenda, check. I don't see any new faces. Status updates, I believe. Since we last met, we shipped a patch version of libcnb, which I think it had to do with the SBOM stuff erroring out for some older APIs, which we only moved to validate under API 07. I think that was the only change. And hey, I don't think there are any build-back API changes being planned. Actually, there's the new API which introduces process-specific directories or working directories per process. So I think once the lifecycle PRs go in, we'll probably add that and so that we can test against it. But those are still pending release on the lifecycle side. But I don't think there's anything else in the new API that significantly changes things.
Yeah, that should happen in the next like month, right?
Yep.
Build-back 08.
I think we should also start adding issues on libcnb when we make changes to the build-back API through spec or RFCs. Like whenever an RFC gets merged that affects the build-back API, we should create an issue on libcnb to track it. I don't think we do that right now.
No, I don't think I think we've talked about it, but we don't do it yet. Do we have one for 08?
I don't think so. Anything else, Daniel, that I missed?
No, I think that was really the only. There was just that one small change in libcnb. I don't know. I added it further down in the agenda, but there was that lifecycle update for backwards compatibility with SBOMs. I don't know if you want to talk about that now.
Sure. Actually, do you mind if I bump that to the top?
Sure.
I don't think there's anything else apart from this. Anything else from your side, Terence?
I don't think so. I think 08's probably like the main one that came out of core team sync.
Let's see. I think in the last working group, we were close to just getting consensus on the system build back stuff, which might impact authors. I think there was some discussion yesterday around how system build back should impact the normal build back group. But I don't know if the rest of the folks here are interested, in which case we can talk about it. But Joe has a summary here on the changes that need to be done to his current RFC to make sure that they have very minimal impact to the existing group. There were also some open questions on how system build packs would interact with platform APIs that don't support it. Like, should they just be ignored? Should there be a warning, or should there be an error? The recommendation was that it should just warn in case it's running on an older platform API that there are some build packs that were supposed to run but are not running.
Is that something the platform is required to support if it is at that API level, or is it optional?
It's not going to be the platform that's throwing the warning. I believe it will be the lifecycle detecting an older platform API and possibly detecting system build packs and saying that, hey, I saw this default file in some default place in the builder. The platform probably doesn't know how to deal with it, so should warn saying that you might be missing a few things.
Okay. I was just curious from a platform standpoint, as we have the Spring Boot integration implements the platform stuff. I was just wondering offhand if that's probably going to need some work then.
Yeah. Think this we also had like a general discussion on what happens when there are new features which are not supported on older platform APIs. This is also something that happened with the SBOM stuff, where like in the older platform APIs, the new SBOM just entirely vanishes silently. And in the new platform API, a build back on the newer API version cannot output all things. So we also spoke about what should be the general like way of dealing with build packs that are on a newer API that require functionality that is not yet supported by the platform they're running on. But yeah, the thing, those were like the highlights. Sorry.
Sorry, maybe I missed this, but like, what was the conclusion that was come to about that in the working group?
I think the recommendation was that the lifecycle should warn if you've updated the lifecycle on the platform. Like the platform API may remain the same, but if you have a newer lifecycle version, then it will warn. That is there any other RFC here that folks are interested in?
I've seen some work going on with the Docker files. Is there anything there that we need to be considering, with regards to libcnb?
I don't think so far we have like even the end-to-end POC. Like so far, they've managed to get Camico to run the extensions, but we've not gone beyond the extension phase, like how it uses the output, build and run images to the final export. So I think once those details become a bit more clear, we can like have some issues on libcnb side. That's also why the RFC is still open, because we were just waiting for the implementation POC team to get back to us on what details need to change. We did have a discussion yesterday about how the gen packages interface would work, and how the lifecycle could potentially generate SBOMs for run image extensions. I think the initial version of the Docker files RFC or the implementation for that might ship with a gen packages implementation, like a reference implementation provided by the project that ships alongside the lifecycle image that comes right now, and the default implementation is probably going to be SIFT based. And I believe we still have to settle on the exact interface, but the gen packages interface would generally look like top level input directory, list of directories or paths to exclude, the output SBOM paths, and I believe the output SBOM path will determine the format that the BOM would be generated in. So the formats would be similar to the ones supported by the build packs API right now. So SIFT, CycloneDX, and SPDX all in JSON format. But I think still not concrete, but that was like the closest we came to a working gen packages implementation in the office hours yesterday. The idea is that the output that gen packages will create will be compatible with this run images from RFC that Anthony has. And I think there's just one last point that he needs to address to make it compatible with the extension stuff. But once this is done, I think we also have enough votes on the SBOM RFC. Anything else? We'll take that as a no. Daniel, do you want to talk about lifecycle in SBOM?
Sure. Yeah, I added this on because the recent lifecycle release added support for backward compatibility with the SBOM formats, so that build pack authors can now output the old format that goes into labels and the new format that gets stored as a layer. I suspect, I haven't gone back to look at the code, but I think we put some checks in libcnb that prevented that. So I think we're going to have to go back and relax those. So my plan was probably next week to submit a PR to do that, unless someone else has time to do it sooner.
Yeah, I can take a look and probably remove those checks. Do we want a warning or?
The lifecycle is doing a warning if you have bumped the API version and are only outputting the old format. So essentially, like, it's trying to catch the case where like a build pack author would bump their API version and not know that this changed. And so then it would alert them to say like, hey, you should be outputting at least both since you've changed your API version.
Okay, so I guess in our case, we can add a check where if you are on the new version, but you don't output both, we throw an error. Like if you're only outputting the label one with the newer API.
I mean, I'd be okay with just going with the warning that the lifecycle generates. I'm not sure that a stronger check is necessary.
Okay. Yeah, so just removing the warning, I guess it will create an issue and we can discuss on the issue what we want to do with this on the libcnb side.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then I know that the V2, we deprecated the old format, so I don't know if that's probably a different issue of
Yeah.
altogether.
Cool. In terms of V2, I just wanted to circle back with maybe with Daniel and you, Frankie, on if there are any like updates on like how it's looking right now, whether it's useful for like packet and libpack, and what people think about the current interfaces. I know we at Bloomberg are hoping to use this soon, at least the new interfaces it provides, because like some of the layer contributor interfaces, which I documented the shortcomings of in this one, they're sort of getting harder and harder to get around with.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it much lately, but if we want to try to define a timeline, that would probably help me focus a little bit. So I know, like what sort of time frame we're looking at to cut like a release of that. There's some minor cleanup things that I still want to do in terms of things that have been marked as deprecated in V1 that we should remove in V2. That's little stuff. It shouldn't be huge impacts. I think there was still an open issue or an open pull request from Forest that was being discussed. And I haven't had a chance to respond to that. And then there's also some discussion about the logging interface and what we exposed there. I also asked Emily to take a look at some of the things that we had talked about too. So I'm hoping she'll be able to give some feedback this week, maybe on some of the things that she'd like to see too with V2. I know there's probably a number of things that had bugged her over the years. So.
Yep. Okay. I guess we can discuss this current pull request. And Daniel, is there already an issue for the logging changes we want to make somewhere?
I know it might have gotten closed out, but I think what we had talked about in a previous meeting at least was possibly looking at having like a logging facade rather than or something that's very easy for others to overload and provide kind of their own style of logging. I think it would help with the kind of integration of Packet because then they can kind of control the output format in a way that's consistent, so there isn't a like, visual difference when they change. But then also, we've talked about things like going forward about like structured logging and stuff. If we have kind of a logging facade that can support some of that stuff, then it might be easier down the road when we want to go to that.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think about what something like that might look like, but I haven't had time to hack at it.
Is there anything really that we do here that is like that affects the presentation of logs? I thought we just like printed things out, and that's how libpack was able to like have a different style of output than what happens with Void by default.
It's pretty basic. I think the idea would be that as someone overriding, like if I wanted to provide my own logging implementation, then libcnb's format should look like my format too.
By libcnb, you mean the logs we add and build and stuff?
Right. Like if there's a way that we can, as someone kind of extending, libcnb with our own custom logger, that way we don't have like visually different outputs.
Yeah. Can you open an issue so that we can talk about what things are visually different between what libcnb currently outputs versus what we expect it to, and how that would be made generic?
Yeah,
I know there was some discussion, forgetting who brought it up, but we were, or someone was looking into open telemetry integration with build packs, and the open telemetry has some mappings between various popular structured log libraries to certain common fields, and it also provides a nice way to sort of add profiling and monitoring to your build pack code. I know that's something the Heroku folks were interested in, like being able to like have a consistent way to track timings for detect build failures and then be able to ship them somewhere. So I did a bit of research into open telemetry and how, like, what that integration would look like, but I didn't go too deep into it. But from what I see, we shouldn't really be inventing our own structured logging or monitoring formats. Like open telemetry has a pretty generic and fairly well mapped out version for both of these things. So maybe it's worth just looking at that.
What does how does that affect the output of what's shown to users?
So-
do we have to change? Would that be a change in life cycle then?
Probably. So what would happen is open telemetry defines like some common fields for structured log outputs. What we could do on the build pack side is define a formatter that can use those common fields to like print out logs. So you could potentially provide the formatter string or config file alongside the builder so that everything that's all the build packs included in a builder follow common formatting. That way, if someone's running a builder and there are multiple build packs from various different places, if they're all outputting in structured log format, you can, based on certain field types, define like what the output should look like. So if it's like they're defining level to be won, and then in the formatting you've said that all the won log lines should appear in orange, you'll be able to set the config from various fields and how it's presented in the builder, and as a build pack you can just output all of these things as structured logs. There'd be no formatting to it, like there'd be no colors, bold strings, whatever. All of that would move to a common formatting config, and as a build pack you'd be outputting like structured logs in JSON or something. Now the main issue with that would be bash based build packs. Like how would bash be able to do logging in this way? But I think if for almost any other language, OpenTelemetry has a list of common libraries that support structured logging for each of the languages, and how the fields from that library map to the common OpenTelemetry representation.
That was my question, was like, yeah, other language support, but OpenTelemetry is pretty popular, so maybe someone's even done that for Bash.
I did not see Bash. I did see like Python, Go, Rust, like some most popular libraries for each of these languages in terms of structured logging, and then what fields they use and how they map to like the fields defined in OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. I mean, it sounds really interesting. I'll log an issue and we can kind of discuss more. It definitely seems worth like kind of hashing out the direction that we want to go and making sure that we can achieve that in V2 rather than having to do a V3, you know.
Yeah.
Is this something that we're just doing at the libcnb level, or are we
I
trying
think
to...
it would have to happen at a project level, not just libcnb.
Gotcha.
libcnb may be able to like do some of it, but like in terms of common formatting and like the builder level config.
Yeah, the stuff you just said sounded
Yeah.
more project level.
It's kind of a chicken or egg though, until we do it somewhere, and then there isn't really that impetus to make, you know, it work at the project level. It'd be interesting to have, you know, like the capability to do that as like a proof of concept and show, you know, that it is useful.
Yeah. I mean, you could also potentially do it with libcnb and
It would just be the platform would have to process it, right?
yeah.
And deal with it in your first POC.
Yeah, it's just that somewhere you'll have to define that common file that all libcnb based build packs read from to create that output.
I mean, we could probably spike a thing in pack, right? That would do it to demo it.
Yep. But yeah, I think so. The any other action items that we have from this? Anything else? Otherwise, we can move on to the next. Okay. Testing library. So I know we had like this in the proposed like libcnb design. We had like the core library, the utilities, and the testing library. And at least for the testing library, I think we should offer it as part of libcnb, like being able to do like create mocks while testing your build and detect functions, or being able to do integration testing similar to like Occam. I don't know what people think about that, and also I don't know what like the Paketo folks think about like having an implementation similar to Occam, or potentially even contributing Occam back to libcnb.
Is Occam a packet thing?
It's
It's
a testing, like an integration testing library, basically for build packs, that like hooks in nicely with pack, and lets you make assertions about how images built with build packs behave. Pretty much, it's got like some convenient matchers, things like that. I don't know that we've discussed the idea of contributing it to libcnb. Because we use it so much, and like even in the process of implementing SBOM things, I myself was in there like making changes of various sizes on multiple occasions. So I think there's definitely there's a concern about like, will we be able to move with enough speed if Paketo no longer owns Occam and we need to like deliver on, you know, integration testing features that are being asked of us. But I mean, I've definitely seen users get benefit from it. And it's, as far as I know, it's mostly, you can use it with non-packet build packs. So like it can exist and provide value being fully separate from libcnb or packet or anything.
But currently it does depend on packet, right? For I think some I don't remember what, but it's just a wrapper around Docker and pack, right?
Yeah, so I guess I think it pulls in some packet, like it uses packet as a library, but I'm pretty sure you can use it to integration test the build packs that are not written in packet, I guess is more what I meant to say. So you can make assertions about, you know, like a libcnb built image.
So I think, for example, like one of the things it imports from packet is like this exec interface, which I think is provided in libcnb as well. But yeah, like, so the only reason I was saying is like we will probably need an integration testing library for build packs in the project. This looked pretty generic since all it does is wrap pack and Docker. Obviously, like we wouldn't want to recreate something from scratch that looks very similar, but I think we do need something to test, like as we'll be taking on the responsibility for creating like some common system build packs. Once Joe's RFC goes in, we'll need something to test them end to end.
Yeah, we use that tool with some the build packs that we manage, like in our sample apps, and it works just fine. So I'd be for it. That's not really my tool to give, but it seems like it would be a nice fit. I hope maybe that's something we can add to the next Paketo working group and
yeah, I'm adding it.
Discuss that. Cool. It does seem like if we were to contribute a tool like that, you know, from Paketo, that might be a discussion then to have about having another person from Paketo as a committer, you know, to the BAT team, so that they can merge stuff, you know, like Frankie was saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think we recently merged an RFC on accepting like project level contributions. I don't know whether this will come under that if we just import Occam as a repository, or whether like this would just be a series of pull requests to libcnb. But I think in case the Paketo team is amicable to doing something like that, we can discuss on the project side on how we'll like do the transfer in accordance with that RFC that Stephen wrote.
Cool.
Any thoughts on that, parents?
I mean, does it make sense to keep it as a separate repo versus PRs into libcnb if it's generically useful?
I mean, really up to us on how we want to organize the repository structure. We can keep it as a separate package within libcnb versus a separate repository versus multiple modules in the same repository. So I think it's just whatever we feel comfortable with in terms of core packaging.
Okay.
I would assume that like currently Occam depends on packet for like the exec stuff and some other common things. I would assume that it might have a dependency on libcnb if we decide to make that flavor of Occam. But yeah, like really up to us on how we want to do like how like do this sort of project organization.
I mean, it makes sense to bring something in versus working on our own.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
And I think from like a messaging perspective, I guess it could be useful to keep it as like a separate tool. In that it kind of for people trying to use the library, like, you know, if someone's asking, how do I integration test the build pack that I wrote? And you can offer them like, here's this repository that like will help you test your build packs. There's like none of the implication that, oh, this is only going to be compatible with like libcnb or whatever. And it also, I don't know, from like a development perspective, keeping Occam separate from packet has, I think, helped maintain Occam as like very generic. You know, this is like, there's not the temptation to like, oh, maybe we should test this thing that's very particular to packet. Like, for example, the way that SBOM things happen. We don't have facility to test that in a packet specific way in Occam. You know, and of course, it's possible to be disciplined about that when it's like when the testing is a sub-package of the greater library, but that's kind of how it's played out for us at least.
Is the biggest concern for donating just velocity? Just kind of off the top of your head without talking with the rest of the team?
Speaking for myself, that would be like my main concern. Like if I think back just literally in the past 1 month, to the like the way that we kind of needed to go about changing Occam and the speed at which we needed to do it, that would have been harder, I think, if we weren't the sole owners. Because there's also the question of just, you know, like having more stakeholders. It's easy for us to both logistically make a decision and also not worry like, okay, you know, is there an entire, you know, multi-vendor like set of people with lots of different build pack implementations who all need to be okay with the change that we're going to be making and how we do this testing. So sometimes it's convenient to, you know, have a narrower stakeholder set.
So far, what I've seen in Occam is like what it provides is similar to what libcnb is supposed to provide for the general Go build packs ecosystem. That it's not opinionated, it's a simple wrapper over Docker and pack, and that's it.
Oh, it also, I think right now, Occam weirdly relies on a package that Forrest Eckert owns called Freezer.
Yeah.
Which is also not necessarily a problem, but just something to be considered if this was to be adopted more broadly, because then that's, you know, if that dependency remained, then Forrest would be on the hook for something a bit bigger. Like I had to go in and PR changes into his repository in order to like facilitate some things I needed to do in December.
Yeah, because I also see like a few things in here. I don't know like what these are or how it relates to testing. But I think like even after we agree, we'll have to figure out like some common functionality that would be okay to go in the build packs project one versus like things that are very specific to Paketo. So similar to like how libpack uses libcnb, for example, if that makes sense. But I believe at least the top level package here, I think, is fairly generic. And the matches stuff.
I'll definitely raise this topic at the working group meeting and hopefully get some more information about how the team truly feels.
Any closing thoughts? Last topic, Daniel, I assume you put this.
Yeah, just kind of a share. We have been getting some feedback about ARM64 support on the Paketo side. And I went through and created some tools that just kind of help someone that if they want that to build packs in a builder that are all based on ARM64. Kind of did that as like a first step to just try things out and let people actually play around with it. I think primarily it's like people that are getting the new Macs, that are wanting this. But there's some other, there are some server use cases and stuff as well. But I just wanted to share it if anyone's interested. I know it's kind of another one of those like, we need build packs that work with it, but we also need the tooling to work with it too. And so hopefully just being able to play around with it a little bit more can help feedback into our tooling to improve that. I could share a link here. Go. I'll put this in the chat. So there's just a README with instructions and some scripts that you can run to that'll package everything up for you. And this is for basically the Paketo Java build pack.
Any highlights or gotchas?
Actually, it surprisingly worked well. I thought it would be a little bit harder to get everything packaged up, but a couple of things that make it easier for the Java side is that Java doesn't have a lot of native dependencies. And so it's really just getting an ARM64 compatible JVM, to install. So that was fairly easy to get past that. Besides that, there's kind of the packaging issue. Like you can't have two build packs like with the same name. And so like to get around that, the scripts just tags like -ARM64 on the end of everything. But obviously like down the road, hopefully there's a more elegant solution, with like container manifests or something so that, we can use the same names for our build or the same names for the build packs and just have things pick the right architecture.
I'm curious about the naming issue. What prevents you from building like build pack for ARM versus Intel with the same container name? So like if you're storing it on an OCI registry, I'm not talking about the build packs registry. Is there something preventing you from doing that?
I mean, it just gets confusing because you don't know what's in that image. And you can get into situations where like if someone had pulled the image from Docker it would pull down an x86 image. But if they built this locally, then they would have an AMD image, and it can just be a little bit confusing because it's not clear what's in that image. And so you can end up with like some trying to run something and then it just says like it's the wrong architecture and fails.
Is that an issue with how back packages thing? Because like OCI registry should be able to handle pulling the right architecture based on what you're asking for.
Right. But I don't think pack gives us a way to package that up in the way that the registry can handle that. And that's kind of the issue that as far as I understand it, I could be missing something. It's entirely possible, but yeah, that's my understanding.
I think it might be what I am curious to investigate is whether it's a pack issue or a distribution issue. Like whether we need to change something about the distribution API, or whether it's just something that can be resolved on the pack side.
Yeah, I think that the whole kind of the point of sharing this is to just enable it to be easier for people to play with this stuff and to kind of figure out the things like you're saying, like, you know, there are, I feel like a few rough edges, you know, that need to be, you know, addressed. So, you know, hopefully this will make it easier to play with it and see where we can kind of smooth that out.
Interesting.
Yeah. What do we need to, I mean, obviously we have to figure those pieces out first, but are there changes that need to happen to support stuff in registry? There isn't really a concept of architecture stuff at all. So, I mean, essentially you can create a new build pack like entry, I guess.
So OCI does have a concept of different architectures and platforms, and almost all container runtimes are able to support pulling the appropriate platform and architecture version based on what's requested. It might, I think the last time we discussed this was when Ben brought it up.
Yeah.
We were confused whether the life cycle was outputting a manifest or not. Sorry, a manifest list, not a manifest list. And similarly, whether pack was capable of creating one, because manifest lists are optional entirely. So might just be that it's not aware of them and it doesn't create them. So that might be something we will have to investigate, whether it's an issue on pack side, distribution side, or life cycle.
But even with all that stuff, like I imagine we probably want to expose some of that stuff in the registry.
On the build packs registry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the metadata
Yep.
of it. Like once you have the manifest list, and assuming you can just use the same image that supports multiple architectures, there will probably be a change in the distribution.
Yeah.
Part of that.
But ultimately, I think one other thing that a build pack author will have to do is like figure out which architecture it's running on and be able to download any binaries or dependencies based on that architecture and share that code across, regardless of which architecture it's built for. So I think a bunch of this might be like best practices that we as a project might have to recommend to build pack authors, and then a bunch of it might be like tooling or changes we have to make to our APIs.
do we need to pass that info, or do they just like figure that out by running Unix utility stuff?
Think you can figure it out by running Unix utility stuff. At least Go is able to figure it out. So I'm assuming there's something it reads to figure that out. And other tools should be able to do something similar.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with, anyone that's interested in this area, helping to test things and try things out.
Do you have build packs that run on Unix Windows as well? Like a single build pack, or are those usually separate?
We, as far as I know, have like one build pack that we're also bundling for Windows. And we are doing something similar where it's just tagging dash Windows on the end of everything.
But the underlying code is the same across both.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Like the build pack basically knows when to switch into Windows mode versus.
Yeah, the code is the same. It does the same thing. It's not doing anything that's Windows specific, so it's pretty straightforward. It just gets recompiled with a different binary.
Are you talking about the Windows proc file build pack?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's the only one I know of.
It's a nice scope, well scoped problem. Because I know there's a bunch of, even in the spec, like there's a handful of changes between even how the spec talks about Windows versus non-Windows. All right. I think we're at time. Thanks, everyone.